From 1930 to 34, he made the first voyages into the abyss. 1934, he made a dive to a half-mile down. And for those of you that are really keen on sort of history of science and exploration, you can still get a copy of Half Mile Down at an antiquarian bookstore. They're not very expensive because he was a prolific writer. He was kind of this Carl Sagan of his time, a talented scientist, but he also knew how to tell a story. In fact, what he was something that's very rare today, and that's a naturalist. If you look back in the history of science, especially in the late 20th century, 19th century, the naturalists were the people that knew something about the plants, the animals, the geology, and they could draw because they didn't have cameras then. And so they were kind of all-purpose people, very useful on expeditions. They could run, pass, and punt. And Beebe was of that world as a trained naturalist. He started out with birds, and he did this work in the deep ocean, and at the end of his life, he was working on butterflies. And so he was the ever-curious guy, and he could write, and his books were very popular. He was very popular on the speaking circuit. He made quite a bit of money, and he bought Nonsuch Island in the Bahamas, and that's where they did this dive, at his island that he bought, he owned. And it was a remarkable thing, Half Mile Down in 1934, when commercial diving, hard hat diving and such, maybe they are getting down to 600 feet by then, but it was very experimental. Half Mile Down. So if you're interested in such things, get the book. You've got his illustrations in there. Don't wait for the movie to come out because that's not going to happen. John Wayne's gone. So that was William Beebe, a giant in our field. The one thing I'll mention here, and that is the viewports he used were made out of fused quartz, something that General Electric had just developed, as a crystal, and made out of that. And we have a gentleman in this room. Where's Chris? There he is. His Virgin Oceanic submersible uses a fused quartz stone. The only man to do it in nearly a century. Well done. I'm sure that you know something the rest of us don't know about acrylic. Well, there it is. If you have questions about yourself, you'll meet it in my program. You can ask the guy over there in the corner. Okay. Auguste Piccard was a physicist. He was of the crew, if you will, of Einstein, Bohr. Even Madame Curie was still alive when he started out as a physicist. And there's a wonderful picture, it was in Jacques Piccard's office, of a physicist meeting in Lausanne, I think, about 1920, and they were all there. So he was one of the classic family of physicists around that time. But when he was a student at Zurich Polytechnic in 1904, he was ill for a while, Abed, and he was a balloon pilot in the Swiss Army Reserve. As you know, all males in Switzerland have to belong to the Army Reserve. And he was a balloon pilot, and he was reading these reports of the Meteor Expedition, the late 1800s, the German expedition, all the stuff they were getting by remote sensing, again, sitting on that interface, grabbing stuff up from the depths. And he said, I wonder why I can't use the idea of a balloon to underwater. They're both fluid media. You just have to have something that has payload, and you can make it descend, come back up. So that's what you've been looking at here. The one on the left is his bathysphere. Bathy meaning deep, scaphos, boat, deep boat. And on the right is the balloon that he was more used to in flying through the air. And so he came up with that concept. He didn't do much with it, and it wasn't until 1948, just after World War II, that he developed his first bathyscaphe. FNRS is the French, is the National Research Foundation of Belgium, which had sponsored. FNRS-1, by the way, was a high-altitude balloon that Piccard set a world's record, 1931, 70,000 feet. The conventional wisdom with medical doctors associated with aviation in 1931 is if you went above 24,000 feet, you're sure to die. So nobody would build it, the capsule, the cabin for his balloon, until he found a brewery in Belgium that would make beer vessels, vats, containers, a huge, like a barrel, okay? It had a few openings in it, things like that. They built it for Professor Piccard, sent it to him. That became the cabin for his first balloon. So he knew balloons. I mean,